Hello, good morning. Welcome to WACO, the Water Advisory Committee of Orange County. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I'd like to invite Director Jim Hutchinson to lead us on the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, we start the day with two news, a good one and a bad one. The good one is it's going to rain tomorrow. It's going to rain a lot. And it's going to have lots of snow. And the bad one is we're still in a drought. Can you believe it? To start the meeting, we'd like to invite the representative of WACO, Kathy Green, to give us an update on that organization.
Good morning. I'd like to start off with reminding you about WACO's Spring Conference, which will be held May 9th through 12th. The theme is One Water, One Future, and we'll explore California's shared vision and challenges regarding the state's water future. Our top speakers are Susan Kennedy. Do most of you know Susan? Chief Executive Officer and founder of Advanced Microgrid Solutions, who has served at high-level roles in two gubernatorial administrations and for Senator Dianne Feinstein. She'll share insights into the energy storage field from her vantage point at Advanced Microgrid, and William Kroll, Acting Director of the California Department of Water Resources, and he'll keynote Wednesday's luncheon, and he'll describe the emergency response to the spillway erosion to Oroville Dam. Then moving on to Hertzberg's, one of Hertzberg's new bill, SCA 4. It's a follow-up to his work in 2015 and 2016, and WACO is sponsoring SCA 4 by Senator Hertzberg to provide increased flexibility for local agencies to pursue voluntary demand-based water rates and voluntary lifeline rates to assist low-income customers. Hertzberg introduced a placeholder version of the measure earlier this year. We haven't seen the language yet. WACO is coordinating with its working group of its state legislative committee on this legislation. Hertzberg has a separate bill, Senate Bill 231, that deals with fees and charges for stormwater projects. WACO has a watch position on this. And then on long-term conservation framework, WACO and its members are awaiting the release of the Brown administration's final framework for the updating of the state's approach to long-term conservation for both urban and agricultural sectors. In the meantime, WACO State Ledge Committee has working groups to develop language on the long-term water conservation framework that will be included in AB 968 and the Urban Water Management Plan requirements that is in AB 1654. Both bills are sponsored by Assembly Blanca E. Rubin of Baldwin Hill. And then the Bay Delta flow requirements. WACO's Board of Directors has adopted a policy statement March 10th that urges the State Water Resources Control Board to set aside its problematic, unimpaired flow approach to setting new water quality objectives in the Bay Delta watershed. The State Water Board staff approach could lead to widespread fallowing of agricultural lands and negatively affect water reliability for much of our state's population. The statement calls on the State Water Board to heed Governor Brown's call for negotiated agreements, which have proven successful in achieving positive ecological outcomes while maintaining water supply reliability. And then to demonstrate the broadest support possible for ACWA's policy statement, ACWA is requesting its member agencies, that's all of you, to adopt resolutions to take other formal action to indicate support for this. So thank you very much. Any questions? Thanks.
And then to give us the report on the Metropolitan Water District, our favorite director, Linda Ackerman.
Good morning. I was just reviewing this a little bit. I hope I'm not repeating some of this information I didn't go over last month's report. As we all know, water in California, especially in the north, is at historic levels. And we are expecting, as Jose mentioned, a fairly large storm. The large part will be up north again, along with some snow, which is good news. So we haven't actually really hit that historic level, but they predict that this storm will put us over the top. Repair issues remain at Orville, as you know. This incident could affect our allocation at Metropolitan. We'll see how that goes as they continue to figure out how they're going to deal with the repairs. We are also repairing a crack in the intake apron at Clifton Court. That's at the pumps, where our State Water Project pumps. It's about a 70-foot long crack on an apron. That should be repaired by the end of this month. We weren't pumping water for a while, but we're now using the Central Valley Project pumps to get the water out. I'm not sure if I mentioned, but this is important. Earlier this year, we received about 120,000 acre-feet of water as a direct result of the Feinstein-McCarthy drought bill for California. At this time, our flows were able to pump, and our flows are normal, but that bill was very important in securing more water for us just by changing the operation of the project. The biological opinions are being prepared for the Cal Water Fix, EIR-EIS, and that should be completed about mid-April, or maybe a little bit later. We'll see. They're kind of slow. April 15th is the end of the public comment period to the State Water Board regarding the 3 new diversions for the proposed Cal Water Fix, so we should be hearing, or we should get their blessing, we hope, after that. Negotiations are ongoing regarding paying for the California Water Fix with the other water investors. There should be a cost allocation report in a week or so from Met. It will be put out in the form of 3 white papers. The first paper will focus on the physical infrastructure of the project, design, cost estimates, budget, schedule, risk management. The second will focus on operations and operations of the project itself and the biological opinions. The third paper will focus on the cost allocation and finance proposed cost share. That's what we're all concerned about, to the state, the feds, and the state water contracts. This will be the foundation upon which the board will discuss and make their final decision and take their vote on the project itself, which we have not done as yet. Colorado River, quickly, this is the 4th year in a row that Lake Powell will rise in elevation. The lake will go up 60 feet. Mead won't get its benefits from this water yet. We have that equalizing rule. The rule says that Powell has to fill first after a drought before they can release to Mead. This equalization probably won't happen until next year, and Mead will then rise 30 feet. We don't expect a drought, any drastic lowering of Mead until 2019 now, so that has been pushed out. We don't have to worry for a little while. We just have to pray for more rain. The drought contingency plan in the lower on the Colorado River is still kind of up in the air. The lower basin states all came together with their individual proposals at the end of 2016, and negotiations were going well. There were some issues with the upper basin states for a while, but the issues have lessened with ongoing negotiations and agreement. Both plans in the end will be beneficial to the Colorado River basins. Met, just so you know, is directly involved in discussions with reclamation and the upper basin states, of course, as well as the lower basin states. The IRP is moving toward May workshop regarding the policy principles that surround the IRP. There are a lot of issues we're looking at, and a lot of it is focused on local projects and their development. And I won't go through all that because I'll report after we go through one of these workshops. Okay, last, I have a new book. I don't have a new book, but Met has a new book. This is called California Friendly. This is a guide that Metropolitan has put together. It's taken them some time. It's a maintenance guide for landscapers, gardeners, and land managers. It really covers everything. And if you have a California-friendly yard, or even if you don't, I think it's really important. I can remember years ago when I would just turn the sprinklers on and every plant got the same amount of water. Well, now we know that that's not what's needed. And I like this part because it explores the methods and means of managing weed and pest infestations. So you can use it at home if your spouse is being a pest. Now that ever elusive water fact. Did you know that there's enough water in Lake Superior to cover the entire landmass of the North and South Americas in 1 foot of water? Fortunately, that can't happen, right? This book, by the way, it really is good, which is why I brought it. It is online, or not quite, but it will be online on Metropolitan's website. And I believe you can get copies that way as well. So I recommend this. I think it's going to be good. Thank you.
And to give us a report on the California Special District Association, the person who has brought a new face to CSDA, Chris Palmer.
Sadly, it's this face, but yes, good morning, everybody. How's everyone doing? All right. Well, again, my name is Chris Palmer. I'm the Public Affairs Field Coordinator for the California Special Districts Association. Many of you probably know I served as a staffer for former Congressman John Campbell. Probably told a few people in here, boy, he retired at the right time. It would be crazy working at the district office right now. Today I want to give you guys an update on the Little Hoover Commission. Is everyone familiar with the Little Hoover Commission? Little background there. It's a independent state oversight agency created in 1962. It's comprised of 13 commissioners, 5 citizens appointed by the governor, 4 appointed by the legislature, 2 state senators, and 2 assembly members. But let's wind back to 2000 when the Little Hoover Commission did their first report on special districts. And the title of their report was Relics of the Past or Resources for the Future. And the report really came to all these conclusions about oversight and accountability, the role of LAFCO, consolidation, how much reserves, how much is too much, too little, and property tax allocation. And so CSDA back then responded to all these things. They weren't happy with the report, as many special districts were not, but they did work with the group. There was legislation passed to address a lot of these issues. Now, fast forward to early last year, Little Hoover Commission decided let's take another look at special districts. It's been 16 years. Let's see where we're at. So CSDA has been at the table every step of the way since they announced they were going to do this. We've been at every hearing. We've been in every business meeting. We've provided testimony. We've provided all kinds of information. Have a good working relationship with both the commission, the commissioners, and the staff. So they went over this report. They had three hearings over the last year, and they were focused on three things basically. One, how are special districts adapting to climate change? Two, what is really the role of WACO? And three, they're looking at healthcare districts that don't have hospitals. There's two types of healthcare districts, some that do, such as Grossmont Healthcare down in San Diego, they have a hospital. Then there's others that don't. Camarillo Healthcare District, and they focus on preventative healthcare. So, and basically, Little Hoover Commission didn't understand why you're a healthcare district, you don't have a hospital. So, we've been working with their organization on that as well. So, we didn't like everything in the report, but it was tolerable. We could work with it. So on February 23rd, staff put a draft report together. We had already seen it. We knew what was coming. And then everything blew up. We had two commissioners who just really disagreed with the report. One, Commissioner Scott Barnett out of San Diego. He is as far right as they come. All government is bad government. And he proposed the idea, well, first he said we need to do things more radical and extreme. Those are his words, not mine. Radical and extreme. So he unveiled a death sentence for special districts. Basically, he proposed that there's a sunset date for all special districts, and that every 10 years, your constituents have to vote to reauthorize your district every 10 years. I mean, can you imagine employee retention? Say your GM's been there for 8 years, the election's in 2 years, and he leaves or she leaves. How do you get someone to fill that position? And two, good luck getting long-term financing, right? If you always have that above the special districts, that's going to make that impossible. So obviously we think this is a terrible idea. Then there is Commissioner Baer, who lives in the city of San Francisco, and he is as far left as they come. And he doesn't really know what special districts are, because he lives in San Francisco, and there really aren't a lot of districts in the city. You have BART, and that's about it. And so he's saying all government should be centralized, and all these special districts should fall under the city and county, and that's what we should be doing. So basically, they blew up the report. So now the staff of Little Hoover Commission has retreated. But we at CSDA sent a letter, 5-page letter. I didn't bring copies of it. If you guys want it, please give me your card. I'll get you all the information. Basically responding to everything with all the information, all the questions that the commissioners asked during this meeting. So next steps are the Little Hoover Commission is going to be sending out a survey to their commissioners saying, okay, what do you guys want to do with this? Are you guys happy with the responses you received? When are we going to set a next meeting? So they are going to be doing another hearing. We don't know if it's going to be in June. We don't know if it's going to be in November. We don't know if it's going to be in January of 2018. It depends what direction they go in. So that's the latest on the Little Hoover Commission. Like I said, CSDA has been there every step of the way. We will continue to do this. Our kind of strategy the past year was to work internally, work with the commissioners, work with the staff of the Little Hoover Commission. Now we have to flip that, and now we're going to be going on a public offensive, and we need to start lobbying not only special districts, but your customers. Basically what we're looking for and how you guys can get involved, a few things. One, if you know a commissioner, please let me know. We'd love to have you kind of be a liaison between us. Two, identify some people that your district serves. Maybe it's a nonprofit that benefits from your service. Maybe it's your labor force. Maybe it's a private business. Any of those things, because we want to provide testimony, not just from special districts saying we're great. We need people who are not affiliated with special districts to say, hey, special districts are great. So you can do that, and you can also, quick little commercial, we have our upcoming legislative days on May 16th and 17th. Our keynote speaker is actually the commissioner of the Little Hoover Commission, Pedro Nava. So he is going to be there. We expect about 200 people to be in attendance there. This is a great opportunity for you guys to let Pedro know in a very civil, professional way that special districts are great, and this is why we should be in existence. And so it'll be a good opportunity to kind of get that communication going. So, and then lastly, what we're doing is not only we're trying to educate special districts and how they tie in, but we got to let the public know. Now, I was a staffer for 13 years, and I didn't really know much about special districts. I knew about water districts because I came to these meetings, but I didn't know we had airport districts and cemetery districts and harbor districts, and I had no idea. And an example, I spoke to 2 political science classes last year, one at UCI, one at Cal State Fullerton, about 180 students total. And I go, okay, can anyone give me an example of a special district? Out of 180 students, 3 hands went up. 3. And that was because it was a night class and they were adults who pay property tax. And so the rest of them had no idea. And so I'm like, okay, let me reverse this. How many of you guys were thrilled you had a hot shower this morning, your toilet flushed, your intramural softball game was on a nice green field, and you don't have Zika? Well, everyone's hand goes up, right? They know the services that you provide and special districts provide. They just don't know who does it. They just, like myself, and I'm guilty of this too, the water comes out of my faucet, I'm happy. So we're trying to educate the public more on how they can get involved and learn about special districts. So we launched a public awareness campaign called Districts Make the Difference. I put some brochures out here. And this is a brochure that's more for just the general public. Like I spoke at a Kiwanis club in Tustin not too long ago, and they were stunned when I told them there's 2,000 special districts in California. It's the largest form of local government and the most accountable and most local. They were stunned. They had no idea. So we've been doing this program. We also created some videos highlighting every type of special district. So Rec and Park, resource conservation, water, and cemetery. We're doing all these videos. So I wanted to give you guys a quick sneak preview. Hopefully this will work. We just completed this video, literally got approved last night. And this is kind of a sample of what we're doing. If you want to see all the other videos, please go to districtsmakethedifference.org. So this is the Orange County Cemetery District.
The Harbor District was formed in 1937 when voters unanimously passed a $750,000 bond issue to build the port. The formation of the Oxnard Harbor District in 1937 predates the formation of even the city of Port Hueneme. The vision that the originator of the port, Richard Bard, had was to build a venue for economic development like no other in the community that would create thousands of jobs.
Port of Hueneme is a major economic engine for the community. We employ over 2,400 people in direct jobs. 400 of those jobs are held by residents of the city of Port Hueneme, and 1,000 of those jobs are held by residents of the city of Oxnard.
The entire Ventura County does benefit from the Port of Hueneme being here. The economic development and venue that it provides for companies to come and work here and create jobs is like no other in Ventura County. That's why we call it the economic anchor of Ventura County.
One of our most exceptional programs is a program with the Oxnard High School District, where we have a 10-week class with high school students that come here and for 2 hours after school, 1 day a week, are engaged in a educational program where we have a different player from the port, a different actor, come in and talk to these kids about opportunities in the maritime sector. The mission of the Oxnard Harbor District is not to make the district rich, but make the community rich by having a gateway and infrastructure that supports global trade to the world market and bringing jobs and investment and business here to our region that creates prosperity.
To learn more, visit Districts Make the Difference.
So that's just a sample of some of the videos that we're doing, and like I said, on the website we have probably about 10 of them. So what's going on here, Heather? That's not one of our videos, I don't think. No. Well, that concludes my report. Thank you for your kind attention.
Well, I didn't know about cemeteries, but when I was working in consulting, I was an engineer working for land development. One of our dream customers was a cemetery. Every little place needs a legal description. So when you do a track map of a cemetery, you're doing a track map for 5,000, 6,000 lots. That's a lot of money. They don't come often, though. last month we had a presenter on the Oroville Dam. Next day, I went to an interview at the local TV 6 channel in Laguna Woods, and they asked me the question, what about Orange County? Do we have any dams, or is this there safe? And as far as I know, the only dam that we have is Prado Dam, and I think it's at the border, or if not in Riverside. However, as far as I knew, it's completely safe. Nevertheless, I went to Orange County Water District and I asked a couple of people there, and they confirmed that it's absolutely safe. But we're going to have somebody from Orange County tell us that, so you feel okay. In fact, they're even enlarging the dam. To talk about that, we have invited Greg Woodside. Greg is the manager of the Planning and Watershed Departments and Natural Resource. He's basically in charge of anything from the environmental impact report to doing the actual planning or recharging the basin. That's a big scope of work. He has been with the Orange County Water District for 20 years. He has his bachelor degree in geology from Cal State Fullerton and a Master of Science in hydrogeology from New Mexico Tech. He is a registered professional geologist and a certified hydrogeologist in the state of California. I've known Greg for about that time, 20 years, and he is the person that knows the most about the groundwater basin. And never mind his face, so serious, he can take a good joke. So.
Good morning. Glad to be here this morning to talk about one of my favorite sites, Prado Dam. And, you know, if you drive out there on the 91, you see there's the dam's actually in Corona in Riverside County. As you drive out east, you see there's that little mobile home park downstream. Well, that would not be my preferred place to live, but in terms of the dam, I would feel perfectly safe living there. So that kind of gives you my thought on the safety of the dam, because that's probably the little community that's the most downstream right there of Prado Dam. Like I say, it wouldn't be my favorite place to live, but I would feel perfectly safe from the dam's perspective living right there. This is a picture of a beautiful site for us. This is water in storage at Prado in January. So it's been a great year. We got very nice rains this year. This was taken by a gentleman, Chris Jones, from the Army Corps, who's a person that we work with a lot on Prado. So it was a great year. So I'm going to go through the history, kind of how the district has implemented a program at Prado to conserve water, and give you the background. And then, of course, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. So just to make sure we know where we're talking about. So the watershed, the Santa River watershed, starts all the way up at Big Bear Lake. Prado is right in the middle. So Prado Dam is considered to be the dividing point between the upper watershed and the lower watershed. So a lot of our water rights framework and other institutional agreements we have are based on the fact that Prado is the demarcation between the upper watershed and the lower watershed. So what we're doing, very simple terms, we're capturing water at Prado Dam off to the right here. So Prado Dam's off to the right. And then we have a very well-established groundwater recharge program with all these facilities on the left here to recharge the water that comes through Prado Dam. We, of course, recharge other supplies of water. We have imported water. We have recycled water. We also have water from Santiago Creek that comes down on the lower part here. But the flows that come through Prado are a significant source of our water supply. And so we're capturing flows from Prado, and they percolate in the riverbed, and then they percolate in all these recharge basins we have down here in the cities of Anaheim and Orange. And I would point out, too, that the investments the district has made down here in these basins is really what allows us to use Prado Dam effectively. So these go together. The capture of stormwater at Prado Dam and the recharge of that into the basin, you have to have both. You have to have the reservoir and you have to have the facilities to recharge it downstream. So I would do a little bit of history here, maybe a little audience participation. When might anyone think that we started as a water district looking to capture stormwater at Prado Dam? Anyone want to hazard a guess? Okay, as a county, yes. As a county, we were very interested and involved in water coming from the upper watershed. I'm thinking about in terms of Prado Dam and in terms of when OCWD started looking at capturing water at Prado Dam. So I'll cut to the chase here. So the report that I see in our files is we really started looking to capture more stormwater there was from 1985. So this is a report that was prepared by Camp Dresser and McKee, dated October 1985, Prado Dam Water Conservation Study. So before this time, there was some kind of incidental capture of stormwater, but remember, Prado was built for flood risk management, it used to be called flood control. The Corps doesn't call it flood control anymore. It's called flood risk management by the Corps. So this is really the first report that we see as we look back. So most of the staff weren't here at this time, but this is when we really started getting more focused on how can we use Prado Dam to capture more stormwater. There was some work done before this, but this is when it really started to develop. One more report I want to point out. So this is from 1990, so 27 years ago, a reconnaissance study for the operation of Prado Dam for water conservation. So this was when we were doing additional work to try to get a higher elevation. So the history here is that it started small and that it started to grow. So rather than just go into the Corps and say, hey, we want to have this huge program to store water, it started incrementally, and you'll see why that was important as we talk about this. So this table summarizes the history here. So there's a little, very small amount at elevation 490 that dates back to 1969. So that was a kind of initial incidental capture. And we'll talk more about these elevations in a minute. I'll have a figure that lays out the elevations. But the key point here, it started incrementally. The first real big change, 1990, when we got to elevation 494, and it was that way throughout the year. And then a key factor that came in 1993, store more in the springtime. So the non-flood season, or the springtime, that starts in March. So in March, it went up to elevation 505 in 1993. And MOA is Memorandum of Agreement. That's an agreement between the Water District and the Corps for this activity. And then you see in 2006, another increment, 4 additional feet in flood season. That's October through February. So the key point here is that the Corps was willing to look at this with the district because it started small and the Corps could get comfortable operating a dam whose primary purpose is flood risk management, but now there's a supplemental purpose of capturing stormwater, holding it temporarily for groundwater recharge. And those in the initial discussions might have thought to be in conflict. I mean, can you operate a dam for flood risk management and actually capture stormwater for downstream water supply? Because the funding and the construction of Prado Dam was all based on flood risk management. So if you look at dams throughout the country, many dams have multiple purposes: recreation, flood risk management, water supply, electrical generation, the list goes on. Prado initially, flood risk management. That was the purpose. We have a secondary purpose of water conservation. So this is the time when you're operating for flood risk management. So it's easier for the Corps to store more water in the non-flood season. Well, as this goes through time, of course, it doesn't rain that much in the non-flood season. So, the Corps' flood season ends in February. It's a little different than some of the other agencies, but the Corps' flood season ends in February. So the non-flood season starts in March. So we can occasionally get good rains in March, but typically it doesn't happen. Our rainiest months are January and February. So the fact that we have 505 in the non-flood season is great, but what we would also like is higher elevations in the flood season.
Greg, how much land does Orange County Water District own above Prado Dam in this flood area?
Yes, we own about 2,000 acres in the basin. So the major landowners are the Corps, the Water District, ourselves, and then the County of Orange is a landowner also. So those are the 3 major landowners. So here's our summary of our program. So we're capturing stormwater. It's important to know this is temporary stormwater capture. So the Corps, if they need to, can release this water at any time. We don't have rights to a dedicated storage pool, which is the way a lot of dams in the country are operated, is that the Water Supply Agency has a dedicated pool where that water is stored regardless. That's how a lot of other dams work. Prado doesn't work that way. So the Corps is operating this to temporarily capture stormwater, and if they need to for flood risk management, they can release it at any time. So we have elevation 498 in October through February, elevation 505 March through August. So we can typically take water from the dam at a recharge rate of 350 to 500 CFS. That's important because that defines how long the water is going to be in the pool back there. We want to drain it as quick as we can. So our standard procedure, if there's a pool of water behind Prado, we want to drain it as quickly as possible. So our recharge operators in Anaheim will work every day essentially when there's water in the pool to tell the Corps how much water we can take. And so if we can get all the way to 500 or even a little higher, we'll do that because that drains the pool quickly. It creates more space if there's another storm. So if you can drain that pool as quickly as possible, there's more capture capacity for a future upcoming storm if one comes. And then very important for the framework, it can't impact flood risk management. The temporary capture cannot impact flood risk management. That's an underpinning to the whole program. Okay, so this is a schematic that shows what it looks like. It's a schematic, but it's true to the land use scale. So if you look at the geography, it matches the land surface. So this is Highway 71. Corona is over here. Corona's over here. Parts of Norco over here. So this area right here is the elevation that's underwater up to elevation 498. So these are the lower elevations here. And then this goes up higher elevation, this is up to 505. So our most significant wetlands are right in here. If you've been up there, like to Verhages is right up over here. This is our diversion to our wetlands. So we divert water from the river here to get to our wetlands where we treat it. And the lower part of our wetlands actually do go underwater. If you get water up to 505, the lower part of our wetlands, actually about half our wetlands, are actually underwater. It doesn't hurt them. They're fine being submerged. There's no erosive damage here. The major road across the basin on the western side is Euclid Avenue. So if you go up the 71 freeway, Euclid Avenue is the first road that goes across the basin. And then there's another road that goes across the basin up over here that's called River Road. You also notice Corona Airport there. It's not labeled, but that's this feature right here. This is the Corona Airport. And it's an important feature. It comes into the news occasionally because in a real wet year, that airport can go underwater. But it is on Corps property. It's a Corps lease between the Army Corps of Engineers and the City of Corona. And so the airport owners the airport operators and the aircraft owners have to be ready to move their planes if needed. And that happens roughly about every 10 or 15 years, where it's a big enough year that it's really going to put the airport potentially underwater. This is a schematic, so trying to schematically show what's happening here. So the feature labeled Prado Dam, that's to show the embankment, if you will. So as you're driving out, the embankment is a big structure that goes essentially across the dam and forms the structure that pools the water behind the dam. The structure to the right is the spillway. That's where the 1776 bicentennial logo was painted many years ago. So the big structure there, that's the embankment. So what you see here is that we're storing water at a very small percentage of the storage space. So the 498 and the 505, the 505 is less than 15% of the total storage space of the dam. So there's a lot of storage space here. We're using just a very small amount of it. I see the spillway. So elevation 542, that's the spillway elevation. That will be raised in the next 5 years another 20 feet. So we'll talk a little bit about the San Ana River Main Stem project, the flood control project. That will raise that spillway 20 feet, and that'll then be the ultimate dam that is part of the Main Stem project. The embankment, this big thing right here, the embankment that you see, that was raised about 9 years ago. So that part's already been raised. And this just kind of shows the outlet works. Schematically, outlet works is new too. This is done in the last roughly 8 to 10 years. So the dam does have a totally refurbished outlet works, and the embankment has been raised in the last 10 years or so. Okay, this just shows an aerial photo with those elevations again, and then it shows our wetlands. So the OCWD wetlands, those are in the blue ponds up here, the wetlands. Okay, here's the dam down here. So this is the embankment right here, and this is the spillway right here. This would be the Corona Airport, and this is elevation 498. This is elevation 505. So the OCWD property ownership includes this big swath through here, and then again the Corps owns. The Corps is the majority landowner, and then the County of Orange has purchased land primarily around the perimeter of the basin is where the county owns lands, but some other areas also. So what are we doing to increase stormwater capture? So we're seeking stormwater capture to elevation 505 in the flood season, in the winter time. So we have two activities to do that. We have a permanent change we're seeking to get 505 year-round, or again, that's 505 in the flood season. We're doing that through a feasibility study with the Army Corps. So the Corps owns the dam, the Corps operates the dam, and they're conducting a feasibility study. We're the local sponsor, so we're paying the cost, most of the cost for the study. Of course, also contributing money, but it's very much as a cooperative effort. So a lot of the staff of the district are putting a lot of time into working with the Corps for this. So what we're doing temporarily is we're doing a temporary deviation. Deviation is a core term, or core speak. It just means a short-term change to the water control manual. So each dam has a water control manual. That's the Bible, how the dam is run. And this is a deviation, a temporary change to that manual. So they did approve.
That this year.
Pardon?
During the flood season, did you reach the 5 this year?
Yes. Yes. So they had approved a deviation last year, but it didn't rain last year, so we didn't get much benefit. But this year it did rain, and we did get up to 505. Actually, it went to about 510 this year. So we got that deviation last year, 1 year. We got the deviation this year, 1 year. And then we're seeking a 5-year deviation right now. So we're working with the Corps. So why is there a 1-year deviation? It primarily has to do with the natural resource issues that come up. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has to approve a process that we go through with the Corps, and the Corps consults with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And the service wasn't comfortable doing a multi-year. They wanted to do 1 year at a time for this deviation. But we've been working with them very closely. We think they're going to be ready to go for a multi-year. So that's what we're working on. We're shooting for a 5-year deviation. And this is really a bridge until the permanent change is done through the feasibility study. So the feasibility study gives us the ability to make the permanent change. The deviation is the short-term change until that's done. Okay, now, one other part of rating here is you see this term DSAC rating. So that's Dam Safety Action Classification. It's a rating. It's a numeric rating, 1 to 3. If you live below a DSAC 1 dam, you don't want to be there. That's like dam's really seriously impaired. This is a post-Katrina program that the Corps developed. So after Hurricane Katrina and the flooding in New Orleans, the Corps said we need to survey every facility that the Corps owns. And they had an independent group come in. So it wasn't the local district. It was another group in the Corps came in, reviewed every facility. That review gave Prado a rating of 3, primarily because they haven't completed the main stem project. So it didn't reflect that the dam is unsafe itself. It's just that the main stem project hadn't been completed. Well, Corps policy says they can't permanently change the water control manual at a DSAC 3 dam. It has to be a 4 or a 5 to be able to change on a permanent basis anything in the water control manual. So this is defined in the water control manual. It's what's called the buffer pool elevation, that 505, or whether it's 505 or 498. So fortunately, the Corps can make a temporary change in the water control manual at a DSAC 3 dam, but they can't make a permanent change at a DSAC 3 dam. So we won't be able to implement this on a permanent basis to go to 505 until the spillway is raised. So that's another reason for the 5-year deviation, is that's about, we think, how long it will take for the Corps to finish that project. Now, that'll depend, of course, on federal funding, and the Main Stem project has a whole effort and program to get federal funding to get that project completed. Yes, sir.
What is the coordination with the big dam on the Upper St. Anne?
Yes, Seven Oaks. Seven Oaks.
How's that coordinated with your program?
So Seven Oaks Dam is primarily flood risk management also. And so they have a program to release water from Seven Oaks as needed for flood control, and that's operated in tandem with Prado. So there's a whole structure from a flood control perspective of how you would hold water at Seven Oaks until Prado is not arising anymore. You'd release and stage the flows that come out of Seven Oaks so that they're working in tandem with Prado. Now, Seven Oaks does not have a water conservation program. So I should do a little phraseology here. So the program we have to store water, so the program that I was explaining in this table, that is in the Corps terminology called water conservation. And it's important we use that term because with the Corps, if we use the term water supply, it's a very different meaning for the Corps. And if you're interested, I can explain that later. But it's a very subtle but important difference when we talk to the Army Corps, especially at Corps headquarters. Because when you say water supply at Corps headquarters, it means a certain thing. So this is called water conservation. What that is temporary stormwater capture at a Corps facility. So in terms of Seven Oaks, there is no water conservation program at Seven Oaks. It's strictly operated for flood control. The water district up there had tried to have a water conservation program where they do temporary stormwater capture, but they ran into some issues and they canceled or at least put that study on hold. Yes, sir.
Greg, between Seven Oaks and Prado Dam, how often are those dams inspected by the Corps to ensure structural integrity? I'm thinking that in light of what's happened with Oroville, that maybe the federal government might, step up or increase the frequency with which they inspect all of their dams. Just an observation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head how often the Corps inspects it. I mean, I can say that they actually have an office at Prado, so the Corps has a physical office at Prado, and they have a whole team there that's working on issues in Prado. They have biologists there, and they have their staff that work on finishing the Main Stem project. So there's quite a bit of resources that go, and it's not like the dam's just sitting there and no one's looking at it. I mean, there's people there all the time. There's a full-time operator there also. Now, given, inspection is kind of an additional way to do things, and, you have inspections by people other than the operators. I don't know how frequently that's done, but I know if you want follow-up, I can find out.
Could you?
Or I can at least identify the Corps people who can answer that question.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Question. When the water comes in from the river, the water is moving and it's carrying materials, and then it deposits the materials there. How, I haven't heard, and how is that affecting because of the depositions that are occurring?
Yes. I'm going to talk about that. Yes. That's a very important part of the long-term picture with Prado. Every dam, as it slows the water down, the sediment drops out, and so sediment accumulates behind the dam. Yes. Yes, sir.
Right. The temporary spillway, when was it used last time in Prado?
There's never been flow. There's never been flow over the spillway.
Okay. Is there a lesson learned here with Oroville when push came to shove? Emergency spillway, was an outstanding report. Nothing was done on it, and the rest of the story.
Yes. I would have to defer to the Corps for that. That would be a Corps discussion. It sounds like there's a lot of interest in that here, so maybe the WACO planning could talk about having someone from the Corps come back. Yeah.
If we can let Greg complete the presentation, some of the answer will be addressed in his next slide. But I do have a question.
You're the chair. You're the chair. You go for it.
What makes this water conserved water as opposed to any regular water that comes in? Do you offer a treatment or some sort of?
So before I started working on this, the district and the Corps had developed the idea and the phraseology that this is called water conservation. So you can see it carries through our terminology. You see up there how it's titled Water Conservation Elevation. So that was, again, developed to distinguish this from a water supply project that would typically be done at a Corps dam. Now, in terms of treatment, the water comes into the dam. We have a very extensive water quality testing program. We monitor the water that comes into Prado. We monitor the water down at Imperial Highway. It's very good quality water. And then we also have a very extensive monitoring program where we see how the water quality changes when we recharge. And so the recharge process is actually a very effective treatment system also. So we have a very good handle on the water quality. I was going to go back to the spillway question. So the spillway is 542. The highest water elevation ever is just shy of 530. So it's not even come close. There's a lot of acre feet between 530 and 542. So
when was that?
That was in December 2010, January 2011. December 2010, January 2011. If you remember back then, that was when the Sari line was still underneath the riverbed, and there was concern about the Sari line eroding. The riverbed was degrading, downcutting, and there was concern about the Sari line being exposed and washing out. So they reduced, December 2010, just before Christmas, there was about a week-long storm. It rained about 7 days in a row, and so there's a lot of inflow to Prado, but they reduced the outflow because they wanted to protect the Sari line from being eroded. So they reduced the outflow, and that made the water level go much higher than it otherwise would have. So they actually operated the dam differently than the water control manual would specify, because they reduced the outflow significantly so they didn't have as excessive erosion in the riverbed downstream to protect the brine line. Yeah, so back then that street Euclid, that was closed. Yeah, Euclid's about 515 or so, 514, 515, so it was underwater. Okay, so I want to go through some actual data to show you how things worked this year. So this is some actual data from the fall. So November, we had a couple little storms in November, a couple little storms early December. We started to see more rainfall in mid-December. So this is a storm. What we're actually showing here, this is time versus inflow to Prado in CFS. So this is total inflow to Prado in CFS right here, cubic feet per second. So you see we had a rainfall of 1.87 inches in San Bernardino right around the 17th. So that gave us enough precip. We got enough runoff. And then you see the inflow really kick up, got up to about 4,000. And then you see another rain period just right around Christmas time and before Christmas, 2.48 inches over about 4 days. And we look at San Bernardino because that's where the runoff comes from. So we want the rain up in the upper watershed. So it's really these multiple storms. Now the watershed's kind of wet up. It had been so dry before this, the earlier storms didn't generate much runoff, but now we have multiple storms, we're starting to get more runoff. So now we're showing in the red line the storage. So we still have the inflow. So the green is still the inflow in CFS. The red is the storage. So this is the amount of water in acre feet behind Prado. So you see it really kick up in the response to these rainfall events here. Goes up to about 13,000 acre feet in storage. So this is the same data, I just changed the time scale. So I'm zooming in a little bit more. So again, this is the inflow in CFS. This is the storage in acre feet. Same time period, just zoomed in. So this is to show the benefit of the deviation. So the water control manual without the deviation says they would store to 498, but because we had the deviation, you see the storage is going to go above this amount. So at 498 feet, that's about 90 9,300 acre-feet of storage. We oftentimes round it to 10,000 just for convenience, but it's in more precise terms, it's about 9,300. So the fact that the red line went above where the blue line is, that shows the deviation was in place. So that gave us, in that storm, got up to 500.7, and that little storm right there, that's about 3,500 acre-feet of water. So the winter kept on going. We kept having more beneficial rains, and January and February got all the way up to 505 and a little bit higher. So what's happened about the last 30 days? This goes back from essentially early this week, back 30 days. So this goes back to early March. It's been pretty dry. We haven't really had many significant rains in the last 30 days. And so there hasn't been any additional inflow to Prado from stormwater. And there's always base flow. There's always a routine base flow into the basin, but we haven't had any more stormwater. So we've just been draining the pool. So drain the pool. These are graphs from the Army Corps' website. So it's showing it a little bit differently. So if you look up here first, the green line is the water level. So the water level, green line, you read that on this scale. We got a scale over here, a scale on the right too. So the green line, the water level is read off this scale. The storage, which is the red line, is read off the right side. So they track, of course. So the water level goes down, the storage goes down. So the fact that it's just a steady decline, that's telling you, hey, there's no big inflow surges because there was no more rain. And this is just the inflow and outflow. So these plots out here are showing the inflow and the outflow. So I get a little bit in one subtlety here. I think I have time to do this. So the blue is the outflow. So what this is showing is that early March here, we're taking 500 CFS. But as this is starting to happen, at some point our recharge basins start to have clogging due to sediment accumulation. So the river water brings in sediment to our recharge basins. Our recharge basins collect that sediment, and it collects eventually on the bottom of the basin, right at the water-soil interface. And that thin layer of sediment has a low permeability. So the water flux through there declines. We call that clogging. And so our total percolation rate declines. And so you see we're humming along about 500 right in here, but our operators are telling us, hey, we're starting to see declining percolation rates as we go through March. So as we go through March, we're starting to reduce how much we take. We're still taking as much as we can. We're draining it as quickly as we can, but our recharge rate is starting to decline. And then you see that jump right there. And the reason that jump occurs right there is that in the period of time when the water level is above 498, we're because of our biological opinion from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, if we're above 498, we're trying to drain it as quickly as we can. And the service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, really wants to see us drain it as quickly as we can. When we get it below 498, we have more flexibility from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the biological opinion we have actually has a specified diversion rate, or I should say release rate from Prado that we're trying to meet. As we get below 498, the biological opinion gives us more flexibility. So we reduce our percolation rate. Let me back up just a minute. Our percolation rate is declining because of our clogging, but once we get below 498, we have a little more flexibility, and that's really what's behind that drop right there. Because as we do this, as we reduce our percolation rate, this is when we're going to go and we're going to clean our basins. So we're going to start to clean our basins when we have this reduced release rate from Prado. So if we can have Prado reduce a little less water, it's going to drain a little more slowly, but then we can start to clean our recharge basins in Anaheim. And that's really what's behind that drop right there. It may seem like a pretty precipitous drop. We went from like 430 down to 300. So we're taking 130 CFS less down the river. That then gives us the flexibility to drain our recharge basins and clean them and then put them back into service. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about natural resources. If you go back to those 1985 and 1990 reports, you'll see that one of the major hurdles we had to overcome was that most of Prado is endangered species habitat. So when the district in the 80s and 90s wanted to temporarily store more water, we're submerging endangered species habitat. So we had to have a way to make the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service comfortable with that it wasn't going to harm the species back there. And Prado is actually a very significant natural resource for birds and other species. So I have some photos. I want to delve into this a little bit here. Just for reference, this is a picture from Prado this year. So this is in the winter time. You see most of the trees are dormant. They look pretty brown. But this was in February. But as you go into March, things start to warm up. The trees start to leaf out. This is actually Chino Creek. The water's backed up, so it's not really apparently flowing. But this little access road here is right along Chino Creek. So this is on the western side of the basin. This is another photo in the basin. I'll talk a little bit about the plants here. The darker green trees are actually eucalyptus. So these are non-native plants that, from a wildlife perspective, aren't the preferred plant. These lighter green plants are willow trees. So again, these are eucalyptus, tall eucalyptus trees. These are willow trees. There's a little shrub here called mule fat that's very important for the habitat. This is another picture. Again, these are some of the willow trees over here on the right. I'm going to have a little audience participation. Any little trivia here. So this is a access point on a pipeline. So this is on the west side of the basin. Anyone know which pipeline that is? Pierre Swan can't answer this question because I think Director Swan has seen this picture before in a previous presentation. Which line is that? Or which line is that? I just kind of spilled the beans on it, actually. That's the sorry line, yes. Sorry.
Do you happen to know, just off the top of your head, what species of willow that is?
But that's a black willow.
Black willow? Okay. I'm just curious. That's just for
yeah. And we see black willow and arroyo willow out there. So.
Is that what's favored by the endangered species mostly?
Yes. The willow and the mule fat, yeah. So, yeah, that's actually in the upper watershed, they call it the Inland Empire Brine Line. And the reason I pointed out is that when we want to store more water in the wintertime, the operator of the line, SAPA, always has a question for us. Well, we may need to access that line. So if we have 10 feet of water over it for us to hold the water, SAPA wants to know, well, if we need to do maintenance, how can we coordinate that? So that just illustrates one of the issues among several that we have to work through to have water conservation behind Prado, given all the other infrastructure that's there. So this is actually the really good habitat. So these are willows. These are very mature trees. So the species that we mostly work with in terms of birds are the least Bell's vireo, small little songbird about that big, and then the southwestern willow flycatcher. The vireo is doing very well. The southwestern willow flycatcher is almost gone. There's maybe one or two observed, but there's hundreds of vireo that are detected. And I want to spend a little bit of time to talk about that. So the vireo was really the prominent species that came up back in the 80s when the Water District and the Corps approached the service about, hey, can we store more water back there? So the service looks at that as making a lake that's going to submerge endangered species habitat for this vireo. And this is in the context of there being very, very few vireo and the vireo being threatened so that they were almost extinct back in the 1980s. So this shows in 1983, this is a map of Prado. There's a couple little images of the bird. And again, it's about this big. 1983, there were 10 known locations in the basin. So these are based on data from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So you can see there's like 4 over by the Corona Airport, 4 over by our wetlands ponds, and then a few other locations. So when the district is coming to the service, Fish and Wildlife Service, to develop this program, their service is saying, this bird is almost gone. And so the district stepped up and said, we will become involved and take on a program and develop a program to recover this species, to help this species recover so that we can implement our water conservation and the species can do well and actually recover. And that's exactly what's happened. So I have some other slides to show you how this has recovered, the programs we've done have been multitude. It includes planting more habitat, taking out non-native plants that crowd out the native plants, and also dealing with the fact that there's another bird, a non-native bird called a cowbird, that comes in and lays its eggs in the vireo nests. So think of it as lazy bird. It wants something else to raise its children, so the cowbird lays its eggs in the vireo nests. The little baby cowbirds are bigger than the vireo, so they outcompete. When the little baby cowbird's born with the vireo baby, it will knock the vireo out of the nest. So we have a whole biology program. We have 4 biologists, and they work to actually remove those cowbird eggs from the nest. So they have the permits and the permission from the resource agencies to go in and remove the cowbird egg from the vireo nest. We do a lot of other programs. If our biologists observe that the nest of the vireo is on a branch that's breaking, they'll prop that branch up. They do all kinds of things to recover this bird. We do this together with the Santa Ana Watershed Association, so we have a whole team of biologists in the watershed. So this is what's happened. So it went in 2012 to 451 locations. And this is due to the activity the Water District, together with the Santa Ana Watershed Association, has done to manage for this species. So it's a great success story. So it's been so successful that they just keep expanding. And that's a good thing. There's always a little twist, though. So it's been real interesting that in the last 5 years drought we've had, we've had 5 years before this year of very, very low rainfall. We're all very familiar with that. Well, what that has meant is that in Prado, there hasn't been much water in storage. So notice right here where these dots are. So these are the lower elevations. This is the elevations that the port will store water for us. And notice what this pattern is, and compare it. This is 2012, and compare it to 2016. So I'll just go back and forth a little bit. So 2012, 2016. So what you see is these vireo have come into the lower elevations here. So these are the nest locations. I should say these are the male territories. There's a female that goes with each male territory. So think of these as estimates of the nest location for female vireos. And so they've crowded into the lower elevations because of the drought. There's been no water there. Well, now this year, there's a lot more water, and those elevations, or those locations that would have been there last year, they're not going to nest there this year because there's water. So these locations that were here last year, they're going to have to redistribute. And that's based on previous wet years. That's exactly what we've seen happen. But we ended up having a lot of discussions with the Fish and Wildlife Service this year about that very issue. So the service is asking us, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to these locations down in here, given the water we had this year? So we worked through that. Took a lot of discussion, a lot of coordination. These are the kind of issues that come up as you implement this type of program.
Greg, they like to nest about 3 feet above water?
They like to nest about 3 feet off the ground, yes. They prefer not to be over water, but about 3 feet off the ground. So if you have a mule fat bush, they tend to be in the low part of the vegetation, about 3 feet off the ground. Or in some cases, they'll be up higher in a willow tree also. Yes?
Question, Greg, does the Fish and Wildlife Service have any concerns about, since there's a rapid population increase, about the population exceeding the carrying capacity of the natural carrying capacity of the basin? This is a good thing now, but at what point is too many birds?
That hasn't come up yet. I don't think they're at that level. I mean, if it was in the multiple thousands, I think we might be closer to that. But I have not heard that issue come up. So we worked through it. It's just, again, an illustration of the negotiation and the discussion that come up when you have this type of program. So sediment management. Talked a little bit about sediment management. The dam, as the water slows down, again, the sediment drops out. So it's about 95+% effective at trapping sediment. Very effective. 95% plus of sediment that comes into Prado drops out and settles into the basin. So the effect that has is that the river downstream of the dam is sediment starved. So the water that comes out of the dam is more clear, and that's more erosive. So that's why the river was degrading, and the brine line, the Sari line, had to be moved. I mean, that's the reason the brine line primarily had to be relocated in the Santa Ana Canyon, because the river's cutting down because it's starved for sediment. That clear water comes out of the dam. It may not look clear, it looks kind of muddy, but there's no sand in it. The sand's all dropped out behind Prado. The water coming out is deprived of sand, so it's getting its sand from the riverbed. So I have some pictures below the dam to show what that looks like. Actually, here's first the change in storage due to sedimentation. So in 1941, when the dam was built, at elevation 505, there was 45,000 acre-feet of storage. In 2008, the last full survey that we have for the dam, it was 20,000 acre-feet. So that's a change of 25,000 acre-feet, a loss of 25,000 acre-feet of storage. So we've been looking at sediment management. It's a very complicated problem. It's very expensive to move sediment, but we're starting to look at options we have in that regard. I want to show you some photos downstream. So this gets at what's happening in the riverbed downstream. Have some photos. We're seeing changes in the sediment character, the grain size downstream. And the riverbed itself is a very big percolator for us. So the riverbed percolates 100 cubic feet per second, as much as Anaheim Lake. So the recharge capacity of the river is very important to us, and we're concerned that as the sediment changes, that we may be losing some of that recharge capacity in the river. So some photos here. This is actually a photo. So where we are is we're just downstream of Imperial Highway. So our inflatable dam is right here. This is our first inflatable dam right here. So we divert water off the river here into this basin, and we also have water go down the river to recharge in the riverbed itself. So this is actually a grade stabilizer. It originally would have been buried, so you wouldn't have seen it when it was first built. But the fact that it's exposed now, we actually built a little ramp over it. So this is actually a little apron of sand that our bulldozers will put across it, so we don't damage it with our bulldozers. So that's just visual evidence of how the river has been degrading. When we say degrading, we mean eroding down. That's what we mean. And you can kind of see as you look at this, the sediment itself is not just sand, it's sand and cobbles. If you go back 30, 40 years ago, it would have been almost all sand. So it shifted from almost all sand to a coarser sediment. So this is just another picture. May not show that good. Apologize for that. But you can see there's a lot of gravel and rocks out there. And what we like was what the river was 30, 40, 50 years ago, which was much more sand. This is a series of pictures going from upstream to downstream. So the picture on the left is at Weir Canyon. So this originally would have been a much more sandy sediment, but what happens is the sand is winnowed out. So because the water coming out of the dam is sand starved, the river will pick up the sand in the riverbed, and so the sand has been winnowed out. What you have left is mostly rocks. So Weir Canyon, we don't recharge up there, but that sediment on the left would not recharge very well. It's very hard. It actually armors. There's a technical term called armoring. If you look in the scientific literature for what happens below dams, it's very well documented by geomorphologists that below dams, the sediments become coarser and they interlock. They tighten up and become very hard. That's called armoring. That's a picture of armoring on the left. Now, the middle picture is at the Santa Ana River at Imperial Highway. Again, these are 30, 40, 50 years ago would have been mostly sand, and now it's more sand and cobbles. The right side, this is more down by Lincoln Avenue, our Five Coves Basin, more downstream. This is a picture from 12 years ago, so a little bit dated, but it is more sandy down there. So if you just visually, if you ride your bike along the river trail or if you survey the river trail, if you're down at Anaheim Stadium, it'll be more sandy. As you go upstream, it'll be more coarser. Now, the reason that's happening is that this sand on the right, a lot of that is from the Santa Ana Canyon. I mean, it's eroding the sand out of the Santa Ana Canyon, and that's being deposited downstream down by Angel Stadium. Now, of course, there's some native sand there. It's a very complicated process. There's native sand all the way down the river. But a lot of what we're seeing is the sand that goes by Angel Stadium is sand that was eroded out of the Santa Ana Canyon. Okay, so the Water District is looking at a project to start to remove, on a small scale, sediment from Prado Basin. This would help give us information to design a larger scale sediment removal program. So we want to start relatively small. There's a lot of technical issues that come up with removing sediment. There's really been very little historical work to remove sediment from Prado. The district and the county Riverside actually had a small sand removal project at River Road a number of years ago. But this would be a project to begin to test dredging. So test dredging in Prado Basin and remove sediment, and also dry excavation. Also, again, collect data to help us plan a larger scale study. So this is where we're looking to implement that. We have to go and clear vegetation. We would do some dry excavation to prepare for dredging. Then we would then dredge for 4 months. This is our demonstration project to remove sediment. The location of the sediment removal, this is the dam embankment. This is the spillway. The red square up there, or the red polygon up there, is OCWD property. We'd be removing the sediment from OCWD property and then temporarily stockpiling it at the storage site. If you ever go out there, this is actually the Corps' office right here at the edge of Corona. So we would dry excavate about 40,000 cubic yards. In 4 months of dredging, we could get about 80,000 yards. If the dredge works well, potentially could be up to 160,000 yards. When you dredge, you run into a lot of issues. You know, how many buried big rocks are there? Are there buried trees, buried vegetation? All those things impact the productivity of your dredge. So by doing this relatively small-scale project, we can get actual information on how productive a dredge would be in this environment. So we're planning this project with the Corps. We've actually done an EIR for it, but we're working with the Corps for the federal NEPA compliance and the permits we need. That's our current status for this project. How am I doing on time? I got 5 minutes. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about forecast-informed reservoir operations. If you're at the last Aqua conference, Dr. Martin Ralph from Scripps gave a presentation on this. We've been talking with his group and the core group that's working on forecast-informed reservoir operations. Is something that we think has advantages for us at Prado. So forecast-informed reservoir operations, the basic idea is that historically the Corps has operated based on what they call water on the ground. The Corps would operate historically at Prado not so much based on the weather forecast, but the actual weather. So historically, that's how the Corps has operated. So if you go back 30, 40 years ago, yeah, of course, they look at the forecast, but they actually make their decisions based on water on the ground, what's actually happening with the rain. But as forecasts have started to improve, of course, now they start to look more at the forecasting, but the forecasting tools they have and the runoff prediction could be improved. So this would be an effort to use more advanced weather forecasting, more advanced runoff forecasting to actually guide operations of the dam and hopefully help us capture more water for water conservation. So I'm not going to go through this, but if you're interested, there's a very good website. If you just internet search forecast-informed reservoir operations, this is the website of the group that Dr. Martin Ralph is implementing at Scripps. Has great information if you like weather, if you like this kind of thing. It's really good stuff. So this just shows, this is something that Dr. Ralph has presented. This is an example from Lake Nacimiento up in the Sonoma County Water Agency watershed. So Sonoma County and the Corps and their stakeholders are looking at this reservoir as a pilot study for how can you use more advanced runoff forecasting together with weather forecasting to operate the reservoir and capture more water. And so they're the first out of the gate. We're working now with the Corps discussing with them if Prado can be a second pilot study. So we're working with the Corps and this FIRO, Forecast Informed Reservoir Operations group, to see if Prado could be a second pilot study. This figure actually shows why that would be helpful for us. So this is a Army Corps plot. This is right off their website. So this is the same kind of plot we looked at before. I'll just go through the lines again so you can catch what we're showing here. So up here on this side, we have the water level. That's the green line. So you can see when this started in mid-February, the water surface was at 503. The red dashed line is the storage. So that's on this scale over here. So in February 13th, we had about 503. The elevation was 503. The amount of water in storage, round numbers, about 19,000 acre feet. This is the outflow is the blue line. So the outflow is about, say, 400 CFS. So this is when there's water in storage. Just look right here. Don't look here. Right here. There's water in storage. We're draining the pool. Just drain the pool. The pink line is the inflow. So you can see we're draining it a little bit faster than the inflow. So the outflow is a little greater than inflow. So the water level going down a little bit. So very slow draining right here, because overall the inflow is still pretty high. The inflow is pretty close to what we're able to drain it at. But what's going on here? There's a big slug of outflow right here. This was based on a forecast. So the water level was at 503. They'll store for us temporarily to 505. But there was a big storm forecast. Remember back February 17th and 18th, we'd been hearing for days about this big storm coming, like 3 to 5 inches of rain. So the Corps saw this storm coming, and they used the forecast to pre-release water from the pool. So the rain actually occurred right here. So it was a non-rain day, and the Corps went from about 500 CFS to 4,500 CFS of outflow, based on the forecast. How do you think that makes the water district feel? Nervous. Because if that storm doesn't materialize, they pre-release that water and it's gone. So now, they take a note here of how far they pre-release. So this is this pre-release of water. They let water go from the dam at 4,500 CFS to get the water elevation down essentially to about 497, 498. So they had exactly a target. We want to release this amount of water to get down to 498. That's because flood risk management dominates. That's the primary purpose of the dam, is flood risk management. So if they have water for us in storage, there's a big storm coming on the forecast, they're going to pre-release it if it's a big storm. That's exactly what they did, based on the forecast. It's essentially forecast-informed reservoir operations without really calling it that. So what's the interest of us? If they're going to operate this way, we want that forecast to be as best as possible. Because this amount of water that they release right here, that's the amount of water almost for one of our cities for 1 year, like the city of Fountain Valley. That's a lot of water. And we want the best forecast that can be had to make those kind of decisions. There's a couple other reasons, but that's one illustration of why the water district is interested in forecast-informed reservoir operations. That concludes my talk.
I think there is a lot more information that we want, but I want to spend 2 minutes asking for your help and help managing this meeting in terms of time. If you have a conversation to conduct during the presentation, as a courtesy to the speaker, please exit the room and conduct your conversation outside. Second, there is an average of knowledge in the audience, and some of participants are really well knowledgeable about the engineering and the aspect of the presentation. If you have many questions to ask, please moderate your questions so others have the opportunity to ask the question. And I think I'm preaching to the choir here. But if we do that, we probably save time and give enough time to the speaker to complete the whole ideas he has or she has. Anybody else have any question, any comment before we close the meeting? Well, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your visit.